Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. And we usually start with a little text, and I'm using the Living Spring today from Spirit Emmanuel. And we usually read a text to begin with to harmonize our thoughts and to ground us here today. And the text for today, it's called, "What am I to do?" And it's a question that Paul asks. And it goes like this: thousands of people approach the gospel for the inveterate worship of self-indulgence. How can I stay in control? Some ask. How can I relax? Inquire others. And the questions keep multiplying, strange, reproachful, incomprehensible. There are those who ask for cheap comfort while in the flesh, those who demand undue affections, those who long for unconfessable businesses, those who demand resources to make serving peace and serving the good more difficult. The question of the Apostle Paul at the moment is blessed by the divine presence, is the standard for all learners and followers of the good news. The great laborer for the revelation does not ask to be transferred from earth to heaven, nor does he degenerate into suggestions of favoritism for his personal cycle. He does not ask to be exempt from responsibility, nor does he flee the duties of the struggle. So he asks, what am I to do? Grasping the importance of the effort for which he would be responsible. And the master tells him to get up and sell light and love through selflessness. If you have been called to the faith, do not ask the divine guide for privileges or benefits that may justify your remaining in spiritual stagnation. With the Lord, let us seek the endeavor that his infinite goodness has reserved for us, and let us proceed triumphantly towards our sublime renewal. So let us pray. Let's close our eyes. Let's take a deep breath in, deep breath out. Feel the chair that we're sitting on, and relax our shoulders. Let's elevate our thoughts to the divine, to God. And thank you, God, for all that you have given me, for all that you give me. Thank you for the air, for the bread, and for the peace. Now, we just heard those words. Let's now listen to those words. Thank you, Lord, for all that you've given me and all that you give me, for the air, for the bread, and for the peace. And now, one more time, let's feel the words. Thank you, Lord, for all that you've given me, all that you give me, for all the air, for the bread, and for the peace. Thank you that I'm here on earth. Thank you that I've been born. Thank you for knowing you. Thank you for trusting you. Thank you for being here today, the opportunity that we have received to be in this loving and peaceful place with the urge to learn from you. So please, maybe listen, maybe see, maybe understand your words, maybe feel your teachings. And through those, may we progress through our journey to you. So be it. So be it. Well, thank you for being here today. So our conversation today is about the wandering sheep and how can I find comfort in this parable. We'll be talking a lot about virtues today and how the virtues tie into this parable. And we usually start with a few initial reflections. There's 3 questions here that I want you to silently think about, reflect, and see if you either know the answer or you could learn a little bit more from them. The first one is, do we know how to awaken our virtues? Do we know, is there a guideline that we follow? Are we aware how to do this? How to awaken our virtues? And then, are we aware of the virtues that we need to awaken? Probably many. Do we know which ones we need to awaken? And after we start reflecting about all the ones that we need to awaken, do we get overwhelmed? We get lost because we have too many to work on. Right? Let's get into the parable now. And we'll read this parable and we'll look into a few sentences and reflect and try to find the symbolism in them. And this is from Luke 15:10. And it goes like this. Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep, and one of them gets lost. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after one lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me. I have found my sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. So the invitation here today is for us to feel the symbolism of this parable and walk through it. And I wanted to ask you guys if you know, why was Jesus always talking in parables? Can you think of a reason? Or there's many.
Because back then it was the way people would understand him.
Yeah, exactly. And nowadays we're fortunate enough to have more knowledge, to have spiritism, to have superior spirits that have brought to us or uncovered meanings that were in the parable all along, but we just couldn't see it. So they came to us showing new meanings, new ways of looking at these parables, and this is what we'll be trying to do today. There's two main ways to look at parables. We can either do it through a rational logic, where we just look at the words, make sense of the sentences. That helps us know, right? But there's another way that we can use the emotional logic, where we're trying to seek that deep meaning that can touch us, right? At a level that reaches our feelings, and we can fully grasp what it's trying to say. And once it reaches our feelings, it actually promotes very therapeutic effect in ourselves. And this talk here will be aiming for this emotional logic. And all this actually came, or most of this actually came from a seminar that was done here in 2016 from a project called Spiritiza, and who will be coming here next weekend. I encourage you all to attend if possible. So they came here in 2016 and 2017. I wasn't able to be there, but I did watch them afterwards, and that's where we got the idea to do this talk. In 2016, he went over this parable a lot deeper than we're going to go through here today, but also the invitation for next weekend is where you'll actually go through this parable again, and we'll spend a lot more time. So this would be an introduction for us to start thinking about the parable, so we can go further in over the weekend, next weekend. So let's start with that one sentence up there. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep, and we'll be focusing on the word sheep here. Does any of you know what the word sheep here represents? And I know some of you were there in 2016. Oh, no, please do. Just for a good reminder.
Yeah.
Right? Virtues. Exactly. So the sheep here in this parable, they represent the virtue. And if you look at the gospel, according to Spiritism, when they talk about virtue, they say virtue at its highest level is a combination of all those essential qualities which constitute a goodly person, namely to be good, charitable, hardworking, sober, modest. Unfortunately, these virtues are almost always accompanied by slight moral failures, which tarnish and weaken them. So this last sentence here gives us an indication, more or less, that perhaps we have the virtues already, but we've tarnished them and we've weakened them. And to help us go further into this thought, we can use something that Spirit, it's really hard to read. Joanna D'Angelis, in the book Love, Unbeatable Love, that one right there, from a Brazilian medium called Divaldo Pereira Franco. In this book, she goes further and describes us as seeds. So she paints a picture that we can better understand. And why seeds? Because seeds, they have all the ingredients to become trees, right? And if we picture ourselves as seeds, what are these ingredients?
The virtues we are growing inside of us.
Exactly. Right, so the virtues are the ingredients in the seeds, the virtues, the divine laws, right? They're there already. And it is only through work, through patience, care, and regular watering that the seeds become trees. The same applies to us, right? We all have the ingredients because we were giving them within ourselves. And we all have the tools, we all have the water to turn them from seeds to strong trees, as long as we make that continuous effort to do so, right? So I'm going to bring you back to our initial reflection and explain why we use the word awaken on both of them. We didn't use the word create the virtues, right? We carefully chose awaken because we, all of us here, everybody, already are the virtues as an essence and as a potential. Why those two? As an essence, because we were all created with the ingredients, the virtues. And a potential because we were all created equal and ignorant with the tools to develop our virtues into a strong tree. So that's the point of awakening. If we move on to now another sentence, when it talks about and loses one of them, we just have to be careful with the word lose here. It's not that we're losing our virtues, that we can't retrieve them anymore, we're lost, they're gone forever, right? Because again, they are within us, they are in our conscience. It's just a matter that we lost sight of it. We can't see it anymore, but it's still there within our field, we just can't quite see it as well. And this is the first step to the first question that asked, how can we awaken our virtues? The first invitation here is, as the man realized one sheep went wandering around, he became aware that that virtue needed to be awakened. And this is the very first step into awakening our virtues, is to learn that it's missing, right? It's to scan your field and realize, actually, that virtue is not here anymore. I should go and find it. This is the first step. And we're going through 4 steps here that are crucial or key that we like to convey when it comes to awakening, how to awaken the virtues, right? And then if we move on to another sentence, that after he realizes it's missing, he goes after the lost sheep until he finds it, right? So what does the go after the sheep means? And that would be the second step in developing your virtues.
Take action.
Exactly. You go and you investigate. You take action. You go and try to find it. You go from knowing, being aware that's lost, actually understanding and going to find it, right? Now, how do we find it? How do I know that I have to go north or south, right? We use the divine laws. They are our compass to guide us and steer us in the right direction so we can find those virtues. And like you said, this is the second step in the journey of awakening virtues, which is to investigate. And then we can move on to the third step, which is a very important one, and it has many, many different stages to it. And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. So the question here is, why did he put it on his shoulders? The sheep is a perfectly four-legged animal. It can walk by itself. Why do we have to carry it? Why do we have to put it on our shoulders, right? We can just show it the way, we can drag it, we can do anything else. It's a lot easier, right? So why putting on our shoulders, right? There's two main reasons here. The first one is that virtue awakening has to be very intimate, right? It has to go very deep within us. We have to nurture it, right? So that's the point of having it on our shoulders, right? It's not distant. It's not distant from us. It's with us. It's really close to us, right? We can feel it. It's very intimate, and it's also on our shoulders because it requires continuous effort. Every step of the way, every step that we take, we can feel that weight, right? That's our effort. So it's with us all the time. It's not once in a while, right? It's always, right? It's constantly with us. It's the effort that's patient and that perseveres. And this becomes the third stage of virtue, awakening, because now we have moved on to the development phase. We're actually developing it. We're learning from it. This is usually the long one, and to help us stay on this development, when we look at when he said he joyfully puts it on his shoulder, right? So why the word joyfully there? Why is it something joyful? Right? We're carrying the sheep. It requires a lot of effort. Why do you think it's something joyful?
I think if you just decide to do something that you just do for the sake of doing and you just keep complaining, you lose the purpose.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's along those lines. Like we said, because it's something, by finding our virtues, by developing our virtues, we're fulfilling our existential purpose here. Right? We came here to Earth. We got reincarnated with a purpose, right? To develop our own virtues, to develop ourselves. And when we're doing so, we're fulfilling that existential purpose, right? It's the purpose of an immortal spirit, right? So it's not any joy. It's not the joy of going traveling. It's not the joy of getting something new, right? This is an existential joy, right? It's something that comes from within. And it makes the effort of carrying that sheep light, soft, and rewarding. Right? So by going after those virtues, by developing them, by using the divine laws to guide us, we're taking up Jesus on his invitation. And when we do so, our yoke becomes easy and the burden becomes light, like he told us. And that's why we can say that we're joyfully putting them on our shoulders. And this joy that we feel, this is the third stage still, right? But it's the assurance that we're in the right path, right? The more we develop this virtue the right way, the more we get this gratification of joy. So it just helps us understand that, yes, we are in the right path. This is the way that I should be going. And if we go back to the gospel according to Spiritism, Lazarus, here he's talking specifically about the law of love, but we can take it further. And he said that in constant labor within the divine laws, you shall find the sweet joys of the soul. Right? So that's the joy that the man was talking about there. It's the sweet joys of the soul, right? It's our existential being. It's the joy that comes from within, right? It's not the one that passes by, the one that stays with us, that makes a mark. right? And then, after he put it on his shoulders, he went home. Why didn't he go back to his pasture where all the sheep were? He actually went back home. What do you think that was?
I forgot.
That's okay. So he actually goes back home because he's bringing it back to his conscience, to his soul. He's living it now. It's become part of him. And he can now show it, which is the fourth stage of developing our virtues, right? And that's where we're living it, we're applying it to everything we do, and we're exemplifying it. And this is very important. It's not to show it and to exemplify it. It's not to brag about it. They're very different things, right? And here's where also the charity comes with the fourth stage. We're showing it to people how rewarding, how good it is to develop those virtues. The same way that we look at Jesus and we're inspired by his actions. We look at some mediums from Brazil, like Chico, right? We're inspired by these actions, and that's what they mean by exemplify it, right? We're able to influence other people by living these virtues. And if we go further on that sentence from Lazarus that we just talked about, he says, the sweet joys of the soul, which are the preludes to the joys of heaven. Right, so we're one step closer here to feeling that the joys of heaven. And then just one last thing to think about from this parable while we're still talking about virtues. It's then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, so why friends and neighbors? Aren't his neighbors his friends? So why distinguish those two, right? So here he wanted to show them that, like we said before, show them that we've awakened and we've developed the virtue, and then we're sharing it with everybody else. But why friends and neighbors? They're two different things. You remember why? Or what they represent? So the neighbors, we technically don't choose our neighbors, right? They can be good, bad, whatever. And these represent our challenging experiences that we go through that just they happen in our lives. We don't necessarily choose them, and they're usually challenging. Our friends, however, we actually choose our friends, right? And these are the stimulating experiences that we choose to be part of. And a very good example of a stimulating experience is what we're doing here right now. Right? We chose to be here. We chose to listen to his words. We chose to take a step further to improve ourselves. And it's very interesting when we think about the two together, because it is through these stimulating experiences that we go through that it gives us the strength to overcome our challenging experiences. Right? If we come here, we learn more, we know more, and we can look at our challenging experiences from a different perspective, right? And learn from them instead of fighting against them. And through the law of attraction, it's amazing because we'll be always attracting those two. Right? They'll always be coming knock on our door as an invitation for us to use them to learn more, to improve ourselves. So now we've gone through the 4 stages, from awakening to developing our virtues, right? And we've talked about learning, realizing the sheep is lost, investigating, which is going to try to find it, develop it, which is carrying it on our shoulders, bringing it back home, to live it, to practice, to exemplify it. So that answers the first, or tries to answer the first question, right? How do we develop the virtues? So now we'll be moving on to the second question. If any of you remember, it was the question about how can I find the virtues that I need to awaken? Which ones? Right? How can I find them? And this brings us back to a question that we always talk about. Many of you might be tired of hearing it. It's question 919 from the Spirit's book. And he goes saying, what is the most efficacious method of ensuring one's own moral improvement in the present life and resisting the attractions of evil? Do you guys remember the answer to the question is very simple. It's 2 words in English. In Portuguese, it's a few more. But the answer to the question, they say, one of the sages of antiquity has told you already, and it's know thyself. It's very simple. It's only 2 words, but the meaning is huge. So we needed a little bit more. Like how? I need some guidance, right? How do I get to know myself? And he goes on in this answer, talking about the examination. So through the examination of our conscience, right, which is the man in the parable, scanning his field, counting the sheep and realizing the one was missing. Right? It's through reviewing our daily actions, questioning ourselves by thinking, through my actions that I did today, am I being loving to myself? Am I being benevolent? Am I being kind to myself? Am I being fair to myself? And after we've answered yes or no to all of these, we go back and ask, am I being loving, benevolent, fair to others? And when we do this reflection, we have to be very honest with ourselves too and be unbiased, right? Not using excuses to say why we did something, right? We have to be. It's a simple yes or no question, and to be able to answer yes or no to them, we can refer back to the divine laws. They'll tell us whether or not we are being loving, benevolent, or fair. And this is very important because if we don't know ourselves, something fills that space. There's no such thing as the empty. Just as in when there's no light, there's dark. There's still something there. Now, where am I going with this? It's because everything we feel, be it angst, be it restlessness, be it rage, is mainly due to 2 main causes. Either things that we did against ourselves or things that we haven't done for ourselves yet. And there's a very key difference between the preposition here, against ourselves, that's when we're harming us. And for ourselves is something good that we haven't done for us yet. And to illustrate this, we can think about the virtues, the counter virtues. For example, what is hatred? If you think about a bucket of that virtue, what is hatred? Hatred is simply the lack of love. Hatred is something that we did against ourselves, and love is something that we haven't done for ourselves yet. And the way here is for us to take love, to feel it, and put love in that bucket so hatred can come out. We're not removing hatred, because there needs to be something in there. There's nothing empty. We're not removing it. We're putting love. We're not fighting hatred. We're putting love. By doing it so, hatred can escape. And the same goes for envy, right? If I feel jealous, if I feel envy with somebody, that's a sign that we're lacking self-admiration. So that's the virtue that we should be working on. The same goes with arrogance. If I'm arrogant, that's because I'm lacking humility. And this goes on and on. Every virtue has its counter virtue. But basically, that's what we use when we're answering the yes or no questions, right? If we realize through our questions that we're being arrogant, then we have to work on our humility. Right? So why is it important to realize that the sheep is lost? And those 2 pictures here, the one on the bottom means the human being that comes to earth and just lives one life. The top one is the spiritual being. And so it's important to realize that the sheep is lost, that we have to awaken our virtues, because the more I seek the meaning of my actions, the more I exercise that review of our actions, right? The more I'm using the divine laws to gauge myself, which means I start reflecting things from a perspective of a spiritual being, not a human being. Right? By doing the reflection, by trying to improve ourselves, we're realizing that we're not here just once. We're not here just to enjoy life with the material things that Earth can provide us. Right? We're here to stay. We're here for a while. We're here for eternity. We'll survive this life. Right? So by trying to improve ourselves, we're starting to reflect and we're starting to see ourselves from a spiritual being, not from a human being perspective. And this is very important because as we remind ourselves, once we look at ourselves as a spiritual being, our mind starts to serve conscience instead of conflicting with it. And to paint you a picture, it's just as if I'm thinking about myself as a human being that's just here on earth once, I might do something dishonest. I might be arrogant to somebody. And there's always something in our minds kind of knocking on our mind telling us, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's not very right. But you're just here once. Like you only live once. So why bother, right? This is making me feel good about myself. Or just keep going. So we're constantly fighting our conscience. Our conscience is trying to tell us, maybe we shouldn't do this, but we don't listen. But when we start realizing that we are spiritual beings, we're here to improve ourselves, not just to enjoy our material things on earth. We start to realize and to listen to our conscience. So now our minds, our actions, they're serving our conscience, not going against it. And once we stop fighting our conscience, we see everything that's in it. We see all those seeds. We see all those ingredients. We can feel it. Right? We can see the virtues. We can find the divine laws, and we know where the truth lies in there. It's just a matter of us going and seeing it. And to paint a picture of a virtue that, like, how do we know when a virtue has been found or not? We can think about temptation, and it's something very easy to picture. Temptation only exists when the virtue is lost, when we haven't realized that we should go find it. So if somebody sees money, it's a very simple picture to paint. If somebody sees money on the street, do I feel tempted to take it? Right? And this has to do with the virtue of honesty. So if I have found the virtue of honesty, that temptation won't even be there. You look at the money and it won't do anything to you. You won't feel, oh, maybe I should take it for myself. Right? But if you haven't developed that virtue of honesty, then the temptation of taking the money will still be there. Right? So that's a good gauge whether or not you have that virtue, and if that's the virtue that you should find. So we've realized how to maybe find the virtue that it's missing. Now this leads us to the third question on our initial reflection is, hold on, it's actually a lot more than one sheep that's missing. There's a lot more virtues, right? And when we start trying to find those virtues, we might face a field that actually I can't see any sheep. They're completely all lost, right? So or we can see a field where we see multiple sheep very far away, right? And two things come out of it. Where do we go first? Right? There's so many that we have to work on, right? And here, if we're still thinking with a human being perspective, we'll get very anxious and overwhelmed. We'll be thinking, there's so many to go. How do I know which one to go first? You start going somewhere and then you realize there's another sheep over there and you steer away and you go find another one. So it might actually make us very anxious, especially when we're thinking that we need to become Jesus tomorrow. Right? We only have this lifetime. Right? So we need to work on them all. So this might bring us the anxiety, which is and the root cause of this anxiety would be if we're thinking about us as human beings as opposed to spiritual beings. And this was what touched me the most on this parable. And to me is where I found the comfort on this parable, which is when we analyze this here. What does it mean when we only lose one of them? He's not saying that he only has one virtue to work on and everything else is already worked on, that only one sheep is lost. What he's talking about here is that per incarnation, we have one virtue to work on. We don't have to focus on all the other ones. We can focus on only one of them. Because by focusing on one virtue, we can actually develop it fully. Right? And let's not get anxious, right? Let us remember that none of them is lost. If we look and go after just one, we're not leaving the other ones behind. We're not going to lose them forever. Again, they're always with us, right? So it's just a matter of time. Incarnation after incarnation, we can go and develop those virtues one at a time. And it's important because when we're focusing on only one, right, we're able to actually carry it on our shoulders. We can't carry 5. We can carry 1. Right? Once we're carrying only one, we can carry it properly. We can feel it. It can be that intimate relationship that we need to have without dropping it. We're constantly learning from it, nurturing it, because we're giving full attention to it. It's the focus on that one sheep. Now you might think, oh, but I want to develop a few more. I just don't want to develop just one. That's not right. So let us remember that the virtues, they're never independent. You can think of it as a string or Christmas lights even. A virtue is one light, right? And we've decided to take that one light and lift it through our development, right? So we took that one light and we're lifting, and you can see that others follow, which is what we call the satellite virtues. By developing one, others will follow because they are all connected. So it's not like we're only doing one. We're focusing on one, but others will come and be developed. The same way that if we take a sheep on our shoulders and we start carrying it back home, other sheep will realize that's the way, and they'll start to follow. So if it comforts anybody that, it's not like we're only developing one. Others will develop as well. It's just that our focus is on one. And so a good indication, I'm going to go through a couple slides now to help us understand what are some indications that we've chosen the right one. The development process should always be light and soft. If it becomes heavy, it's because we're doing one of two things. We're either doing too much or we're doing too little. Both are not good. And how do we know? We must remember to be honest with ourselves, right? When we're reviewing the things that we do. And we have to be very honest with ourselves at the stage that we are, without comparing ourselves to others. I'm looking inside, I'm realizing this is who I am right now. And this is what I have to develop. I'm not comparing myself to others. I'm not realizing that others should develop some virtues. No, I'm looking at myself, right? And with that, I can't demand that I become a superior spirit tomorrow. Right? I have to be honest. I have to realize where I am and know what it takes to get there. And this demand of thinking that we have to be Jesus tomorrow, it causes two processes that could be very dangerous. One of them is the process of excuses. So I see Jesus so pure all the way over there, and I'm all the way over here, so impure, and I realize this is just not for me. This path is way too long. I'm never going to get there. This is just not for me. This is the process of excuses, which is an indication that we're doing too little. At the same time, if I'm that person that likes doing a lot, right? I want to conquer all virtues at the same time. I'm demanding too much of myself. So when I'm comparing myself to Jesus, I start feeling guilty. I start feeling, why am I not there yet? What have I done wrong? I want to be there. So then I start feeling guilty about it. And this is an indication that we're doing too much. So none of them is the right way. You have to find a place in between. And by focusing on one single virtue, this would be the answer to find what's in between here. And to illustrate this, we can think about somebody that wants to do too much, right? Somebody that's anxious, that wants to hurry. And when we let the anxiety and this rush take over us when we're developing our virtues, we don't feel that development. We might understand that's missing, we might know that's missing, we might understand those virtues, but we don't feel it. So this is a side effect of doing too much. And the problem here is that if we don't feel the virtues, we won't recognize that we're developing them. We won't feel what we saw in the gospel according to Spiritism. We won't feel those sweet joys of the soul. And the problem with this is that we won't see the progress because we're going from one to other. We won't see the progress of one virtue, and we might become tired, and we might lose interest because we realize, well, what I'm doing is not doing any good. I'm not seeing any progress. So this is us going from doing too much to doing too little. And that's why those are harmful. So this process of self-transformation, right, should not be tiresome. We've talked about this before. Through understanding our own limitations, right, to be honest with ourselves where we are, and practicing self-love, following the divine laws to guide us, to steer us. Throughout our entire journey, we will understand and feel the invitation of Jesus. That my yoke's easy and my burden is light. So don't think that by focusing on one virtue, we have less things to do. It's like, oh, I only have to focus on one and it's easy. Well, it's not quite that. Right? One virtue does not mean less effort. It just means more focus. One virtue. So let's remember that. It's actually, to some people, including myself, it might mean more effort because now I have to focus. I can't divert to others, right? There's so many places we want to run and improve. But it's all about that carrying on our shoulders, right? We want to do it once and we want to do it right. So now that we've gone this far, we've realized that we're missing a lot of virtues, but we know that we only have to focus on one. So the big question is now, which one? Which out of the many virtues that I need to awaken, which one should I focus on? Which is the sheep that I have to go after? Now, the person that likes doing too much, they might think, I want to go to the furthest one out. Out of all the sheep that I can see, I want to go to the furthest one out, to the hardest one, right? Because I might think that by going to the farthest one, I'm going to get to Jesus first. Well, that might actually cause us to be anxious and might cause us to not feel because it's just too far away. We won't get the reward because it's just too far away. So we might lose interest again. So instead, we should listen to God through the experiences in our lives? The answer is right there. We just have to reflect on the experiences that we go through our lives. And what do I mean by this? The virtue that needs attention is the one that keeps coming up, basically. Is the one that tests us constantly, that we get experience after experience after experience, and we keep fighting. So that's an indication that that's the virtue that we should awaken. It's not the one that's furthest out, but it's the one that keeps coming up and you try to deflect and not see it. And it'll likely be the most laborious one, but that's good. Because as we talked about before, we learn, we improve by the experiences that we get. And if this is the virtue that we keep knocking on our door, if this is the virtue that we've been giving experience after experience after experience, those challenging experiences that we talked about, it'll just give us more chances to develop it. Right? So this is key to understanding which one we have to develop. It's the one that keeps coming back. And why? Because it's giving us the chance to develop it. So this is my second last slide, and it's one more thing about Jesus's comfort that Alidu in his seminar in 2016 talked about. We're reincarnated. We came all the way back here to develop one main virtue, and now we know that. We're not anxious anymore, hopefully. And then there's something else that we need to realize. We have the tools to develop everything. We have the tools to develop this virtue. And we have to remember that we're here to succeed. What would be the purpose of coming here, going through this whole process of reincarnation, if we couldn't succeed? Nobody will have a challenge bigger than they can achieve. So by focusing, we can see progress. And progress brings merit, which fuel our constant exercise of walking that sheep on our shoulders. And to paint a picture, it's a very simple picture that I thought about. It's like going to school. We don't go to school to fail, right? We go to school to succeed, right? Why else would we go to school? And then at school, we have all the books, we have the teachers, we have all the tools that we need to succeed. Then we have tests. If we get a good mark, that's a sign that we're doing the right thing. We're studying right? The same way, then when we're developing a virtue, we get those sweet joys of the soul, right? Those are the good marks. It's the indication that we're doing it right. If we got a bad mark, it's a sign that maybe we're not doing it right. We have to revisit things, which would be the time when we go back to the divine laws to help us. Maybe I'm not developing this the right way. Let me reflect again and think about the divine laws, and it'll help us steer us back into the right path. So the constant exercise of our virtues through the divine laws fulfills, like we talked about, our existential purpose, right? It allows us to work with our conscience, not against it, which will unlock the feelings of the sweet joys of the soul that we talked about. So hopefully you guys got something out of this, and we will be talking much deeper about it next weekend for any of you who are joining us in the seminar. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finished a little early. 8 minutes early. Oh, okay. You guys have any questions? Do you have any questions that Eric might be able to answer? Yeah. Yeah, I do. I wasn't there 2016 or 2017, but I still got a lot from just listening to them, and I can't imagine what it is to actually be there and be able to feel it. So I'm excited to be part of it this time around. And do you know if the kids have anything? Do you know if the kids
I
have
don't
anything?
think they have, since Renata said that they don't. They actually don't.
Okay.
Well, the one thing is important about this parable is to realize that yes, we have something to do here. We're not here to waste time, right? But what we have to do is something good for us, for sure. And I think you have done great exposing the task for each one of us. Some might be would be more focused on developing patience. Some might be focused on developing serenity.
Mhm.
Some might be more focused on developing love, which kind of higher level virtue. And from the state we are right now, we are trying to fulfill our hearts with simple virtues that might help to develop. There is no way to develop love or charity without serenity.
Exactly.
There is no way to develop love, justice, if we don't develop the patience, humbleness,
Exactly.
right? Meekness, discernment, the virtue of the month. Also, does anybody remember what's the virtue of the month? Authenticity. Very important one. Very important one. So yeah, this was a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it stimulated all of us to be here
Actually.
next week and or at least
Yes.
to listen through the broadcast we will be making.
Perfect. Do you?
And it would be wonderful if you could participate a little more. Feel free to ask him questions.
Or not. And do we? Is this final prayer? Or then we go to the conference?
Yeah, we will go through the final prayer. We just have
Okay.
just a few minutes more. Can you let them know the other side and we're almost done here? Please.
Thank you.
Then I will go.
So yeah, and Eric just released the locations of the seminar next week. Just be mindful it'll be in
It won't be here.
Yeah, I won't be here, so don't come here on Friday.
Too many people. Yeah.
The door will be blocked. So it's on our WhatsApp, and it's in the Northwest for Friday and Saturday, and then Sunday we're going down to Auburn Bay. I think Moa can just walk there. Can we just walk there? Yeah.
More day. Okay, so let's do the final prayer. Just, eu vou precisar de ajuda. Final prayer first. Noah.
Okay.
So let's close our eyes. Elevate our thoughts to God and to our brother Jesus. And thank Him. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, for your teachings, for your kind words, for words that touch us deep inside and that make us realize that all of this is worthwhile. That the joy that we feel from being close to you is the joy that fills our heart, our soul. And it will always be there. We'll carry it through incarnation after incarnation with us. Thank you for the opportunity of having our friends at this location and for being able to listen to you. May we use your teachings to help us every day in every action that we take, so we can fulfill the purpose of our existential being. Thank you, Lord, and so be it.